He raised a glass to himself. I raised an eyebrow. That was the last time he'd stand taller than me. The Piedmont Country Club smelled like old money and fresh lies. Crystal chandeliers hung over men in $1,000 suits, all gathered to celebrate Douglas Parrish's 40-year reign as CEO of Parrish Supply and Logistics. My name is Matthew Parrish. I'm 47 years old, recently retired from the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. I'd spent the last 23 years building cases, detecting deception, and listening more than I spoke. Tonight, I was the uninvited son. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks late. No handwritten note, no personal touch. Just my name, printed on expensive cardstock like an afterthought. I should have stayed home. Douglas worked the room like a politician, his silver hair catching the light as he moved between clusters of Charlotte's business elite. Joel, my younger brother, stayed close to his side, the heir apparent learning his final lessons. They hadn't seen me yet. Good. I positioned myself near the bar, watching. Old habits die hard when you've spent decades reading people for a living. Douglas's gestures were too broad, his laugh too loud. Joel kept checking his phone, nervous energy bleeding through his practiced smile. Something was off. But then again, something had been off in this family for 20 years. The evening drifted on, speeches about legacy and leadership, stories about building an empire from nothing. Douglas soaked it all in, playing the humble titan to perfection. Then he spotted me. His eyes found mine across the room, and for just a second his mask slipped. Surprise, maybe even annoyance. I'd crashed his perfect farewell party just by showing up. He recovered quickly, made his way over with that familiar politician's smile. "Matt, you made it. Wouldn't miss it." We shook hands. His grip was firm, practiced. Mine was steady. "Glad you could get away from whatever it is you're doing these days." I didn't answer. Let the silence do the work. Douglas cleared his throat, turned to address the room with a theatrical wave of his arm. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." The conversations died. All eyes turned toward us. "I'd like you to meet my son Matt. He's been away for quite some time." Polite chuckles from the crowd. I stayed perfectly still. Douglas's smile widened. "Here it comes. This is my boy Matt, the quiet one. Never had a head for business, I'm afraid. Some people are born to lead, others—" He shrugged, letting the implication hang in the air. "Well, we love them anyway." The crowd laughed. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from social obligation. Joel's grin was too wide, too pleased. I waited for the laughter to fade. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then I stepped forward and shook my father's hand again. "Thanks, Dad. That was perfect." I squeezed once, firm and final. "Enjoy the speech." Walked away from him, straight to the podium at the front of the room. The crowd murmured, confused. Douglas's face went pale. Joel's smile finally cracked. I stood behind the microphone in my full army dress uniform, ribbons, medals, the works. 23 years of service displayed across my chest like a battle flag. The room went dead quiet. I looked out at the faces staring back at me. Business leaders, community pillars, the cream of Charlotte society, all waiting to see what the quiet one had to say. I thought about the forged documents, the stolen inheritance, the years of being erased from my own family's history. Then I thought about what I'd discovered 3 weeks ago. The silence landed before I did. I leaned into the microphone and smiled. Cold, controlled, ready. "Good evening. I have a few things to share about the Parrish family legacy." Douglas couldn't swallow. I could see his Adam's apple working frantically from across the room. The quiet one was about to speak. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in my kitchen staring at that invitation. "Douglas Parrish requests the honor of your presence." Formal script on heavy paper. No handwritten note. No, "Hope you can make it, son." Just my name and address, printed like I was another business contact. The lack of connection spoke volumes. I set the invitation down and reached for my phone. Old instincts kicked in. When something feels wrong, you start asking questions. James Rickson answered on the second ring. Matt Parrish. Been a while. Too long, Jim. You still doing estate law for veterans? Every day. What's going on? James and I had served together in Germany back in the 90s. He'd left the army after 12 years, went to law school, and built a practice helping military families navigate legal nightmares. Good man, straight shooter. I need you to look into something. Quietly. I'm listening. I told him about the invitation, about being shut out of the family business for 20 years, about the feeling that something wasn't right. You think there's a legal issue? I think my father's been planning something for a long time, and I think it involves me not being around to complicate things. James was quiet for a moment. Send me what you've got. Birth certificate, any family documents, business records. I'll dig around. How deep can you dig? Deep enough to find what's buried. 2 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Matt, we need to talk. In person. James's office sat in a converted house near downtown Charlotte. Legal books lined the walls, and his desk was covered with papers that looked suspiciously like they belonged to my family. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Someone restructured the Parrish family trust in 2006. Your name was quietly removed. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Removed how? A notarized statement was filed claiming you voluntarily gave up your share, signed and dated. I never signed anything. I know. Want to guess when this document is dated? The cold spread to my chest. Tell me. March 15th, 2006. You were deployed in Kuwait. I checked your service records. The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. March 2006. I remembered that deployment. 6 months in the desert, investigating supply chain corruption. Ironic, considering. They didn't forget me, I said. They erased me. James nodded. It gets worse. This wasn't just leaving you out of future plans. This was a complete legal removal using forged documents while you were serving your country overseas. I stared at the papers spread across his desk. My family's legacy reduced to legal footnotes and fabricated signatures. How do you process that level of betrayal? Your own father doesn't just shut you out, he orchestrates your disappearance from the family record. What do we need to prove fraud? More than just absence. We need a document discrepancy or a witness to intent, someone who knew what they were planning. I thought about the business, the people who'd worked there over the years. There was an accountant, senior level, used to send Christmas cards to my mother. What was her name? Barbara Carson. She left around 2007, I think. Seemed sudden at the time. James made a note. I'll find her. It took him 3 days. Barbara Carson lived in a modest ranch house in Concord, about 30 minutes outside Charlotte. She agreed to meet us at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. She was smaller than I remembered. Gray hair, careful eyes. The kind of woman who'd spent decades keeping other people's secrets. I wondered when someone would come asking, she said, sliding into the booth across from us. You know why we're here? I've got a good idea. Your father wasn't as careful as he thought. Barbara wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Her fingers were steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. They wanted things clean before Joel took over, asked me to backdate some filings, make the numbers work retroactively. What kind of filings? Trust restructuring, ownership transfers, the kind of paperwork that changes who owns what and when they owned it. James leaned forward. Did you keep copies? Barbara smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. I kept copies. Not out of loyalty, out of instinct. She explained how she'd suspected legal irregularities when the family lawyer started pressuring her to alter dates and signatures. Something about the whole process felt wrong, so she'd made copies of the original documents before they were corrected. I kept a sealed copy of the original trust document in a safe deposit box. Never trusted that family lawyer. Too slick. What happened to you in 2007? They pushed me out. Nothing dramatic, just made it clear my services were no longer needed. I took early retirement and kept my mouth shut. Until now. We spent the next hour going through details. Barbara had documentation showing the original trust included my rightful inheritance clause. It was never officially voided, just buried under falsified paperwork. The picture became clear. Douglas hadn't just made a business decision to exclude his difficult son. He'd committed fraud to guarantee I'd never have legal claim to what was rightfully mine. It wasn't just a lie, I told James later. It was a clean kill. They meant for me to vanish. That evening I sat in my apartment, looking at copies of the original trust documents. My name was there in black and white, equal share with Joel, full inheritance rights. Seeing it made it real in a way that hurt more than I expected. 20 years of being treated like the family disappointment, 20 years of assuming I just didn't measure up, 20 years of thinking maybe Douglas was right, maybe I never had a head for business. But it wasn't about business at all. It was about control. James called the next morning. "I've got everything we need to file a complaint. You ready for this?" "What happens when we pull the trigger?" "Once we submit the sworn affidavit and file the trust discrepancy with the North Carolina probate court, there's no going back. This triggers a verification process under inheritance fraud guidelines." I thought about Douglas at that podium, his smug smile, his casual dismissal of the son who'd served his country while he was committing crimes. "Do it." "You sure?" I looked out my window at the Charlotte skyline. Somewhere out there, my father was planning his retirement party, celebrating a legacy built on lies. "I'm sure." 2 hours later, James called back. "It's done. The wheels are in motion." I hung up the phone and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not anger, not excitement, just the quiet satisfaction of a case finally moving forward. The system would do the rest. You don't confront a lie that deep. You let it collapse under its own weight. The morning after filing the complaint, I spread everything across my dining room table like a tactical briefing. Documents, timelines, witness statements. 23 years of military investigation experience had taught me one thing. The truth always leaves a trail. Time to follow it. First step, cross-reference my deployment orders with the filing dates Barbara had provided. The Army keeps meticulous records. Every movement, every assignment, every day accounted for. March 15th, 2006, the date on my supposed signature renouncing my inheritance. According to my service record, I was at Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, investigating supply chain fraud for a defense contractor. 12-hour days in 110-degree heat, living in a prefab trailer with no internet and limited phone access. Kinda hard to sign legal documents from 6,000 miles away. But proving I wasn't there wasn't enough. I needed to show intent to deceive. I pulled up the notary information from Barbara's copies. The witness signature belonged to Patricia Mills, a paralegal at the law firm Douglas used. I spent 2 hours tracking down her employment history. She'd been fired in 2007, same timeline as Barbara. Interesting coincidence. I found Patricia living in Gastonia, working at a small family law practice. She agreed to meet for coffee, probably thinking I was a potential client. "I remember that signature," she said when I showed her the document. Mr. Parrish's attorney had me witness a lot of paperwork that year, rush jobs mostly. Rush jobs? Documents that needed to be backdated. They said it was normal for estate planning, but something felt off. Patricia stirred her coffee nervously. I kept notes, not official ones, just personal reminders. Dates didn't always match up with what I was signing. Another piece of the puzzle. Over the next week, I contacted 3 more former Parish Supply employees. All had similar stories. Sudden terminations in 2007, pressure to sign amended paperwork, questions that were discouraged. The pattern was clear. Douglas hadn't just forged one document. He'd cleaned house of anyone who might question the timeline. Time to escalate. I submitted an anonymous tip to the North Carolina Department of Revenue. Inheritance fraud triggers automatic audits, especially when there's a paper trail showing suspicious restructuring. The beauty of bureaucracy is that it doesn't care about family dynamics. It just follows the money. Next, I leaked the documentation timeline to a financial ethics watchdog through an encrypted drop. Nothing traceable, just enough information to spark their interest in Parish Supply's ownership transfers. Then I did something that would have made my old commanding officer proud. I cross-checked the file digital tax records against Barbara's originals. The system remembered everything, even what they tried to erase. The divergence started exactly in 2006. Before that year, tax filings showed standard family trust distribution. After 2006, my name disappeared from all documentation like I'd never existed. But the digital timestamps told a different story. Multiple amended filings, all submitted within a 2-week window in late 2006. Someone had been very busy covering their tracks. I was building a case that would make any prosecutor smile. Then James called with bad news. "We've got a problem. Defamation and breach of privacy. They're claiming we're harassing former employees and making false accusations." I felt the familiar weight of complications settling in. Every good operation hits resistance at some point. What does that mean for the probate court review? They've paused pending further proof. The judge wants more evidence before proceeding. More evidence. That's what they wanted? I could give them more evidence. "James, I need you to do something for me. Contact Barbara and see if she's willing to testify." That's a big ask. If she goes on record, there's no protection from retaliation. "Tell her I'll make sure her anonymity is protected until court subpoena. No names released until we're in front of a judge." Barbara agreed to testify the next day, not because she wanted to hurt Douglas, but because she'd spent 15 years knowing the truth and staying quiet. "Some secrets get heavier the longer you carry them," she told me. Now came the hard part. I needed to deliver everything directly to the court clerk's office. Personal delivery meant no interception, no legal games. I prepared a sealed packet with 3 items. My complete deployment records, showing exact dates and locations during the supposed signature period. The original trust document Barbara had preserved, with timestamps and legal seals intact. A pre-recorded video statement explaining the timeline, the forgery, and the systematic removal of witnesses. The video was the hardest part, looking into that camera and laying out 20 years of family betrayal in clear, unemotional terms. But it needed to be done. I drove to the Mecklenburg County Courthouse on a Tuesday morning. The clerk's office was busy with the usual legal traffic. Lawyers filing motions, families dealing with probate issues, people navigating the system. I waited in line like everyone else. When my turn came, I handed over the sealed packet to the clerk. "Matthew Parrish filing supplemental evidence in probate case, 2025 PF 4471. She stamped the receipt and filed it away. Simple as that. I've filed evidence in combat zones with less tension. Walking back to my car, I felt something shift inside me. For 20 years, I'd carried the weight of being the family disappointment. The son who couldn't measure up. The quiet one with no head for business. But I wasn't disappointed. I was erased. And now, I was fighting back with the same methodical precision I'd used to investigate crimes overseas. That evening, James called with an update. "The court received your packet. The judge is reviewing everything personally. Should have a decision on proceeding within 2 weeks. What happens if they ruled in our favor? Full investigation. Depositions from everyone involved. Financial audit of the trust restructuring. The works." I looked out at the Charlotte skyline, lights beginning to flicker on as evening settled in. Somewhere out there, Douglas was probably planning his retirement party, celebrating a legacy he'd built on lies. Joel was probably helping with the guest list, still thinking he'd inherited everything fair and square. They had no idea what was coming. The system was already working. Bureaucracy moves slowly, but it moves thoroughly. Every document gets reviewed. Every signature gets verified. Every timeline gets cross-checked. You can fool family members, you can silence employees, you can even fool lawyers for a while, but you can't fool the system forever. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to James. Jim, need you to research something else. I want to know every business partnership, every board position, every public relationship Douglas has built over the years. If this goes public, I want to know exactly what he has to lose. Some battles are won with bullets, others are won with paperwork. This was going to be a paperwork war, and I'd been trained by the best. 3 weeks later, the hammer fell. James called me at 7:30 a.m. It's happening. The court just formally notified the parish estate of conflicting trust documents under investigation. I was drinking coffee on my apartment balcony, watching Charlotte wake up. What's the timeline? Simultaneous notifications. The Revenue Department opened an audit on Parish Supply's estate transfer and ownership structure. They're treating this as potential inheritance fraud. I set my coffee down. After months of building the case, watching the system work felt almost anticlimactic. How long before this becomes public? Depends on how Douglas handles it. If he fights, it gets messy. If he tries to settle quietly, he'll fight. That's who he is. I was right. By noon, Douglas had hired private counsel, Thomas McKinsey, senior partner at McKinsey & Associates, the kind of lawyer who specializes in making problems disappear for wealthy families. By 2 p.m., my phone rang, Joel's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. Matt, it's Joel. We need to talk. There's been some kind of misunderstanding with the trust documents. Dad's lawyers think we can settle this privately. No need to drag things through the courts. Call me back. I deleted the message without listening to it again. What do you say to someone who spent 20 years enjoying stolen inheritance? Sorry, didn't seem adequate. The next morning brought more calls. Joel, Douglas's lawyer, even my cousin Sarah, who'd heard rumors and wanted to mediate family differences, I ignored them all. You don't negotiate with fraud, you expose it. The public unraveling started 3 days later in the most unexpected way. Remember that retirement party? Turns out a local business magazine called Charlotte Business Today had been there filming. They were working on a feature called The Legacy Builders of Charlotte, profiles of successful business families. Someone at the party had recorded Douglas's speech on their phone. The part where he introduced me as the quiet one, who never had a head for business. The crowd laughing, me standing there in full military uniform. An attendee posted a short clip on social media with the caption, "Rich Dad Humiliates War Hero's Son at Retirement Party." It got 12 views the first day. Then the audit story broke in the Charlotte Observer. Local business dynasty under investigation for inheritance fraud. Someone connected the dots. That humiliated son in uniform? Same guy filing fraud charges against his own father. The video started spreading. Local news picked it up, then regional outlets. By Thursday, it had gone viral on 3 platforms. Reputation is a currency. They spent it all, thinking no one was watching. The combination was devastating. Rich businessman humiliates military son, then gets exposed for inheritance fraud. David versus Goliath with legal documents and social media. The comments section was brutal. People hate seeing veterans disrespected. They hate seeing wealthy families abuse the system even more. Within a week, the story had legs beyond Charlotte. National military support groups shared it. Legal ethics forums discussed it. Even late-night talk shows started making jokes about the quiet son who fought back. Douglas's carefully built reputation cracked like ice in spring. The business consequences came fast. Parish Supply's biggest contract was with a defense logistics company. Military suppliers don't like negative publicity involving veteran mistreatment. They requested temporary suspension of contracts pending resolution of legal issues. 2 other major clients followed within 48 hours. Joel got hit worse. His position on the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce board suspended pending investigation. His seat on the United Way Executive Committee? Same thing. The social proof that comes with being a parish in Charlotte evaporated overnight. Suddenly, people who'd celebrated Douglas's success started distancing themselves. Board meetings got awkward. Country club conversations stopped when Joel walked by. Business lunches got canceled for scheduling conflicts. I watched it all unfold from my apartment. News reports, social media updates, phone calls from reporters I didn't answer. The strangest part? I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge high. Just the quiet completion of a mission. Douglas disappeared from public view entirely. No statements to the press, no damage control interviews, just silence. His lawyer issued one brief statement. Mr. Parrish maintains his innocence and looks forward to resolving this matter through appropriate legal channels. Translation, they had nothing. James called with updates every few days. The Revenue Department audit was thorough and expanding. The probate court had scheduled hearings for next month. Barbara's testimony was rock solid. "How are you holding up?" he asked during one call. "Fine. This is a lot of pressure. Media attention, family drama, legal proceedings. You sure you're okay?" I looked out at Charlotte's skyline, the same view I'd had for months while building this case. "You know what the funny thing is, James? For 20 years I thought something was wrong with me. I thought maybe Douglas was right. Maybe I didn't have what it takes for business. And now I know the truth. I was never the problem. I was just in the way." The irony wasn't lost on me. Douglas had introduced me as the quiet one at his retirement party, the son who never spoke up, never fought back, never caused trouble. He built a legacy on silence, his own and everyone else's. Turns out, mine spoke louder. That evening, I went for a walk through downtown Charlotte, past the office buildings where Douglas used to do business, past the restaurants where he'd entertain clients. People on the street didn't recognize me. Why would they? I was just another guy in jeans and a t-shirt. But everywhere I looked, I could feel the shift, the careful distance growing around the parish name, the conversations that stopped when certain topics came up. 20 years of being erased, and now Douglas was experiencing his own disappearance. The difference was, his was public and permanent. I walked home in the quiet evening air, thinking about justice and how it sometimes takes decades to arrive. But when it does, it's thorough. 6 months later, I drove out to the old family property. The land sat at the edge of Mecklenburg County, 40 acres of woods and overgrown fields that Douglas had bought in the 80s. Back when Joel and I were kids, we'd spent summer afternoons here building forts and catching fireflies. Now it was just another asset in legal limbo. The court had validated everything: the original trust, Barbara's testimony, the forged documents. Douglas's lawyers had tried to fight, then tried to settle, then finally just stopped returning calls. The Revenue Department's audit found irregularities going back 15 years. Not just my inheritance, other creative accounting that painted Douglas in an even worse light. Joel had called twice in the past month. I didn't answer. What was there to say? I parked at the edge of the property and walked into the woods. The trees were bigger than I remembered, but the paths were still there. Overgrown and untended, but familiar. I found the clearing where Joel and I used to play soldiers. Ironic, considering how things turned out. I sat down on an old fallen log and pulled 2 documents from my jacket. In my left hand, a copy of the original trust, now officially validated by the North Carolina Probate Court. My name printed clearly in the inheritance clause. Equal share with Joel. Full rights restored. In my right hand, the forged 2006 version, the document that had erased me from my own family for 20 years. The paper felt different in my hands. One represented truth. The other represented a lie so deep it had shaped 2 decades of my life. I looked around the clearing. Cold November air, bare trees, the kind of quiet that only comes in the woods. This felt right, private, final. I lit a match, The forgery burned slowly on the cold dirt, orange flames eating through the lies line by line. The fake signature curled and blackened. The notary seal melted into nothing. 20 years of believing I wasn't good enough. 20 years of carrying shame that was never mine to carry. Gone. I watched until there was nothing left but ash. I never wanted the business, I said to the empty woods. Just the truth. Now it's mine. My phone had been ringing all week. Reporters wanting interviews, lawyers discussing settlements, Joel leaving voicemails about moving forward as a family. I'd stopped answering all of them. No gloating, no confrontation, no calls returned. The case was closed. The truth was public record. The system had worked exactly as designed. Douglas would face criminal charges for inheritance fraud. Joel would inherit a business with damaged reputation and mounting legal bills. The parish legacy would be defined by the scandal, not the success. Justice served, military style. Quiet, thorough, final. I stood up and brushed the ash off my hands. The original trust went back in my jacket pocket, not because I wanted the money or the business, because it represented something more important than wealth, the freedom that only silence brings. I walked back to my car through the quiet woods, leaving 20 years of lies burned to ash behind me. The quiet one had spoken, and that was enough.